How to Follow Your Vision with Frank Osgood. Welcome, friends. This is going to be a really fun show. So get your tea and sit down and get ready for a great conversation. Frank and I have known each other for a while. And when I first met him, the only thing I thought of is I have to know this guy. He has a sense of humor. He's a talented and gifted musician in lots of different ways. And one of the things I love about Frank is his intelligence and his way of having you feel comfortable being around him. So you're just going to love this interview. And he's graciously taking the time to be with us the day after his birthday. So, first, welcome to the show, Frank, and happy birthday.
Thanks, Diane.
I love to celebrate birthdays with people because it's like, I think the angels were singing when we're born, and that's a beautiful thing. So, I'd like to
Totally.
start this interview a little bit with, well, you're a guitar player.
Yep.
And so how old were you when you knew that like music was in your bones? How did that all happen? I'm just really curious.
Well, I'm not really sure because my father was a professional studio jazz drummer. So I grew up in Hollywood. His name was Buddy Osgood. His real name is Franklin J. Osgood. I'm Franklin J. Osgood Jr., but he didn't like that name. And back then, in the 60s, having a nickname Buddy as a drummer was, kind of a good thing.
Right.
um, And so, I mean, just as long as I can remember, I've just been around music. Had kind of a strange childhood because back then, and I was born in 66. So back then in the 60s, he would play a lot of clubs and every hotel had a band. If you went to the Hilton, there was a band. If you went to, we used to travel up the five and we'd stop, and whatever the towns were, Fresno and Modesto, and he'd have gigs all the way up to Sacramento, Reno, and then same thing back down. There'd be a hotel and there'd be a 5, 6 piece band, people dressed in suits. And it was a different time. So, I mean, I guess you had to be 21 or whatever to be in the club, but I'm just this little kid running around backstage and no one ever really, it was just a different era, and it's funny when I had to start going to kindergarten, that changed the dynamic of they just couldn't bring me with them anymore. So my mom stayed home and then she got a job. And if my dad was in a session at the Musicians Union over on Vine Street, which, every time I drive, the building is still there. It's something else now, but every time I drive by, I'm like, this is where I spent most of my time as a child is in that building. Downstairs there was a pool hall and everyone smoked cigarettes, of course, and I get paid to clean the ashtrays and all this kind of stuff. But if my dad was in a session and my kindergarten was over, he sort of set up this deal with my teacher. What was her name? Mrs. Blumenthal. That said, look, like someone's just going to show up and I'd be there and, someone I'd probably never met before. Hey, I'm here to pick up little Frankie or little Buddy. They used to call me. Like, okay, and then whoever it was would take me to the union and I'd just go hang out in the pool. So, but I used to hang out with Merv Griffin a lot. He was there a lot, if you remember him.
I remember him. Yeah.
He had a studio right up on Highland at TAV Studios, and there was a bowling alley there. Or yeah, I think it was on. No, that was on Highland. And so he was just around all the time, and I just sort of knew him from just seeing his face on TV, and he'd hang out with me sometimes, play pool and so anyway, so I was around music a lot. My dad tried to teach me drums, but I would always lose the sticks, and he didn't like that. So he had a guitar. He knew how to play, guitar, and I don't even know how old I was when he started teaching me basic chords and stuff like that. Because it's always just kind of been around my family. You know what I mean?
So it's in your DNA and all around your environment. My mom was a concert pianist, and we used to go from club to club to club. And my
Yeah.
parents taught dance, jitterbug dancing, and all the bands were there when I was a little kid. And my brother and I would be the ones running around. And you're telling that story, I'm like, oh my God, I did this kind of thing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's it like you said, it was a different era,
Yeah.
a different era. So I think that's really, really exciting. So tell me a little, or tell all of us, I guess, a little bit about what draws you to the rock and roll that you play now. Like, What draws you to that music? Was it because that's what was big when you were little, or how is that working? Because I think it's great music.
Well, I grew up listening to strictly jazz and blues. We had records and jazz records and blues records and cassette tapes. I still have a lot. My dad passed away, but I have a lot of his old cassette tapes and stuff like that.
Right.
And he would teach me like theory. He could sight read. He wrote charts for people. He's just an arranger. Like, that side of his brain, he was just like a genius.
Right.
And but around junior high, right around then, like the first time I heard Eruption, or when I was my neighbor, I used to have these records, and he came over with Van Halen 1, right when it came out in Hollywood there, and he's like, you have to listen to this. And he put on Eruption, and I remember telling him, that's not a guitar, man. That's a synthesizer or something. Like, no one can make that sound on a guitar. I said, you're crazy. And then but just the pictures, the other songs, the screaming, the first rock song that I heard on the radio was on the station KHJ. It was the Kinks' Superman.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember being so mesmerized, because here's rock music, but they're talking about Superman, which, I was probably 9 or 10 or whatever around that time.
Mhm.
And just hearing that, I just remember just being stopped in my tracks. And that was sort of the birth of the rock and roll side.
Mhm.
And so my dad sent me to this jazz teacher, and he'd be like, okay, every good boy does fun. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I'd bring him whatever little, Walkman, or go, I want to play this. And so I just sort of quit going to him, because he was from a different era, and he was not like, there was a discernible line back then between, like, say, my parents' generation and the rock and rollers. I think today things are really blended. Like, hey, your dad will go with you to a heavy metal concert, or I'll take my daughter to see Steely Dan or whatever. But back then, I did not go see Van Halen shows with my dad, and he didn't like rock and roll, because musically it didn't make sense, and it was too I don't know the word, but I remember I played him a Rush sting, like some kind of Rush solo, and he picked up a stick and he did the same thing with one hand, and he walked away. I'm like, oh man. So because I'm really careful with my daughters, if they go, hey, here's this new band, and they're playing one chord 2 times, dun 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 dun, I go, you know what, that's cool. I don't try to rain on her parade. But so somewhere around there, right around junior high, like, all this stuff, and I could play guitar. So I'm like, well, shoot, I guess I can play Stairway to Heaven, because I know how to play this other classical stuff.
Right.
And at that time, it was actually a really hard time in my life, those years, because we moved around a lot, right? Like, if you tell people from, I don't know, Indiana or something, oh, where were you raised? Oh, Hollywood. Oh, that sounds really glamorous. But when you're actually from there, it's kind of a different story. And we moved like, I think I went to 18 different schools growing up. So I was always kind of the new kid. And
Mhm.
we would, like, LA could literally be its own country almost. Because if you're from the Valley, you're a different person than someone from Huntington Beach, or
Mhm.
culturally, even within LA County or Orange County or whatever. So we'd moved from like Hollywood to Lakewood to Costa Mesa, to Corona, which was like the middle of nowhere back at that time. Now that's where Fender is. Corona to Van Nuys, to just all over the place. And I always had a tough time fitting in, because I had like the wrong shoes, the wrong shirt. Like when we moved somewhere near Orange County Beach, everyone there had OP shorts, Vans, Dolphin t-shirts that were called Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
And here I am looking like a little, like, 11-year-old Ramon. Yeah. And so it was always tough being the new kid. But I remember we moved to the West Valley, and I'm like, oh man, it was like 8th or 9th grade, something like that. I'm like, man, here I go again. First day, don't know anyone. All these people have a history. And my mom said, why don't you take your guitar with you to school? I'm like, okay. So I did. And so I brought my guitar with me to school and then just sat. There was this thing called the ninth grade lawn, which I wasn't supposed to sit on, I guess. But I brought my guitar and I sat there and just all the other guitar players sort of came out of the woodwork, you know. They're like, hey, like a 14, 15, hey man, can you play it? Okay, here's Stairway to Heaven. Here's, some Iron Maiden. Here's, my attempt at some Van Halen solo. And I was instantly the best guitar player at that junior high. So then I just had an instant set of friends. So I'm like, okay, everywhere, if I have to go to a new school, I'm bringing my guitar because that's my gateway to other musicians. And and I still have those close relationships with people from that era. In fact, I just joined an Aerosmith tribute band, and one of those people that was there is in this band. He pulled me into this band like 2 or 3 weeks ago or a month ago. So the connections that I made with those other musicians have lasted like, I don't know, that was like 1982, 1983, whatever. And they haven't stopped. So that's one thing about being a musician or, just being, you don't even have to be the best or the worst, just being part of the community. It's just something that's really amazing for me. That's where I found my tribe. And those are the people that sort of saved me because I mean, being a teenager is tough enough, but being like the new kid every other week and
Yeah.
stuff like that, that really, it helped me spiritually, emotionally, socially. And we did move around a couple more times, but we stayed in the West Valley, right? So I'd move from, DeSoto and Van Owen to Fallbrook and Van Owen, we did, no major. Okay, we're moving to, Long Beach or something like that, I mean,
Right, right.
um,
It was a little bit more manageable, even though it was a
yeah,
move.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I have another a curious question, especially since you've been like playing forever, your whole life. And um, I think it was Walter Reyes who said it in his interview on this show, and he is playing with Chicago now. And Jim Peterick also said a similar thing. And so I'm curious. Um, and that is that they were sharing the sentiment that they think in song and in lyric and in music, and then they almost have to translate into English. So that, in fact, Walter, the way he said it was that musicians have two languages, music and English. And so I'm wondering if that's what happens in Frank's head. Are you hearing song and thinking in song a lot behind the scenes, like in there?
Oh, all the time. In fact, okay, this may sound totally bizarre, but if I'm at a light and I've got my turn signal going, I'll make stuff up to that beat. It goes dun 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 dun. dun. I rent cars a lot.
Hmm.
Like I'm in a rental car, like every different rental car almost every week, and they have different turns. Different cars have different turn signal things. So sometimes it'll go do 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 do, or sometimes it'll go do do do, and I'll just start making up a song like it's so you saw. So my answer is yes, but one place that I really notice it is at turn signals, and I had to have an MRI once done on my knee or whatever, and
Hmm.
so I'm in this tube, and they're like, everyone told me, man, you're gonna freak out, because you're in this tiny tube, and there's these. I don't know if you've ever had one,
Yes, the
but there's
magnet.
these noises going on. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put music to those noises because they're like beeps and bumps and stuff like that. And so, like, I had this, and you have to kind of try to stay still in there, I guess. And I remember just sort of like, okay, this is gonna, instead of thinking like, wow, I'm in this crazy tube, I'm not really claustrophobic, but I guess everyone might be when they're in that tube, and I just started making music to that. So yeah, I'm one of those people, I guess.
See, so I think that's a universal truth. And I don't think too many people talk about it a lot, but I notice it keeps coming up. As you know, I work with a lot of musicians, and one of them that I tour with, I mean, he was fired from his first job in high school working at a grocery store because he was humming all the time and making up songs, as he was taking the bags out to the cars for the people and things. And the manager didn't like that he was humming. And that launched his career shortly after that. So it's it's one of those things where I've always want to ask people when I meet them who I know who are musicians, like, do you really think in music? Um, I think my mom did. She never said it, but I think she did. She was a concert pianist, and I'll bet if she was alive today, I think that would be a common thing.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is yes.
My if we were driving somewhere with my dad and we came home
Mm,
and there was a song on, we would sit there and finish the song in the car,
yes.
all the time because he's so locked into um that song and whatever it's doing for him. I mean, we would just sit there and just take the time to absorb that music and listen to it. So I think I kind of get that from my dad, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I can't turn the car off in the middle of a song.
No.
Somehow it feels personal, like it's not done. You
Yeah.
just don't know,
Yeah. Right.
I don't know. I think it's one of those things. It's just in our genes. So you travel a lot because you play a lot, right?
Yep.
And what is the part of your professional musical career that is the most challenging for you? That kind of annoys you the most? Is there any part of it that's a challenge that you just kind of go, oh, I don't really want to do that part?
Just dealing with different venues because everyone has their own system. Like, I won't say which one, but I did a gig not too long ago. I won't say which band or anything. And we got there and it was just the organization was like there was no one really running things.
Mhm.
And there was they had to show up at 5. We didn't start playing till 11:30. And they were supposed to have this like row of amps and ours were going to be on the back because we were headlining and I don't know, like that part of it. But the before part is great. Then once we got on stage, it was great. We got on an hour late, which is a real bummer. Um, but that to me, that side of it is, that's probably it right there. Just having to deal with, different venues and load ins and all this other kind of stuff. And, we're not, the bands I'm in, we're not AC/DC. So we don't just, step off a helicopter and walk on stage with a guitar. We've got to deal with our own stuff. We do get help sometimes. At places where we play, where there's like a bigger stage and there, you get there and there's crews that go, hello, Mr. Frank. Like I love those gigs because there's people, they take your gear, they set it up for you, they help you break it down. And that's really important too. Like I really one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is to pay attention um to just the health of my hands. Because one thing that would used to bum me out is I would drive, whatever hours to a gig and then start playing and my hands hurt. And because I realized I'm holding on to this hard steering wheel for whatever 4 hours, and so I put on, even in rental cars, I carry a donut with me, right? The car donut that you just slip over and a pair of padded gloves. I think I have one right here, but um, just to keep my hands, just to keep my hands soft. So it's just sort of less friction on my hands. So when I get there, like sometimes I'll get there, I'll have to step out of the car and play right away. You know what I mean? And I carry little like try to ice my hands, just those little tricks, which before I'm like, man, I'm not playing that good. I wonder why that would annoy me.
Right.
So it's a learning process, just learn something new every day, learn something from someone else, like I think one of our friends, every time I Zoom, he had a sticker on the back. Okay, like take it one show at a time. You know what I mean?
One at a
So,
time. Right,
yeah,
exactly. Because
yeah,
and everybody's body is different, you know?
yeah,
And you have to pay attention to your vocal cords and your
yeah,
whole body and your hands, obviously. You can't play if your
yeah.
hands are hurting or whatever. So was there ever a time in your life where you considered seriously doing anything else for your profession other than music?
Well, I'll tell you what. So I had this thing happen. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially, my dream band. I went and saw my dream band and asked them, hey, like, if you guys ever need a fill in or something like that, because I'd noticed they've been using some different guitar players. So the singer gave me his email. I was like, email me. So after the show, I emailed him and he's like, okay, like, we have some gigs coming up, go ahead and do them. I'm like, wow. I mean, I was just freaking out. I never posted anything publicly. I've learned don't post anything publicly until it's actually happening, right?
Right.
Uh, didn't post, but told a lot of my friends, and they were really excited for me and stuff like that. Went to the rehearsal. Long story short, went to the rehearsal and never met anyone else in the band, right? They're just
Right.
like, here's some guy coming in to fill in, right? And so I had problems with my pedal board and my amp like 10 seconds into playing.
Oh no.
And I could feel all the blood like draining from my body. I'm like, this is like one of those bad,
Hmm.
uh, Adam Sandler movies or something like that, but no one was laughing, right?
Right.
And then, so the other musicians were sort of making comments, like I won't say what, but I play with some Grateful Dead musicians, and if that were to happen in a Grateful Dead setting, everyone would come up and give you a hug. I mean, bake you some, like. But the harder rock world, I think it's just a little different, a little different drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so essentially, like we didn't even make it through the whole set, and it affected my playing. I'm just like, oh man, like I just felt like the worst. And I'll tell you something that happened to my father. At some point, he walked away from playing drums and he walked away from the music business. And I never understood that because he was such an amazing drummer. I mean, he was like, like a Buddy Rich, or he's just one of those people that was just really, really amazing, and then when he stopped playing, I'm like, Dad, but you're such a great drummer. Why aren't you out there playing drums? Sometimes he would sit in at this place called Something's Fishy. It was in a restaurant in Ventura. They had a little, jazz open mic or something. And I was trying to tell my drummer friends, like, man, you don't know how great of a drummer my dad is. Like, I was so proud of him. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I remember saying, like, Dad, how can you not want to just play drums all the time? And he sort of lost that desire. And in that moment, like sorry, let me fast forward. So they called me on Monday. They're like, sorry, man, we're using someone else. And I'm just like, oh my, it broke my heart.
Yeah.
And I literally didn't touch a guitar. I didn't, I looked at my guitars and I sort of looked at them with disgust.
Mm.
And we could probably analyze this for a long time, but I mean, that was a really hard blow to me. In fact, um, I started getting into the mode where, I'm just going to sell my guitars and like, that's it. Like, and then I sort of understood how my dad could lose that feeling for wanting to play music. I just lost all desire to play music. So I shared this with a few of my friends. They told me some war stories. Phil told me a really good one. But and it was important for me to vocalize this to other people. I wasn't looking for someone to talk me out of playing. I just needed to get how I was feeling off my chest.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? And then and you know and they just kind of let me go through whatever I had to go through. And I went to a barbecue thing up in Big Sur, and was in this other band, and I told them I'm like part-time, like I can't, I'm not playing guitar right now. There was one band that I play with, it's an AC/DC tribute band called High Voltage, and those gigs, I told them, I'm like, okay, those are the only gigs I'm playing. I'm going to find something else to do. You know what I mean? And then wow, I didn't even think about this. So I had some buyers for some of my Les Pauls, sent them pictures and stuff like that. And they're like, okay, here's the open space on my wall rack where that Les Paul is going to go and all this other stuff. And then, like out of the blue, one of those guys this is like 2 or 3 months later, I mean, I didn't do anything, it was like almost like COVID again, and one of those guys from junior high called me and is like, hey, we need someone we need someone for this band. And then that was like, the light shining through.
Right.
I'm like, Alan's asking me, I think I can do this again.
Mhm.
And that was sort of my lifeline back into playing guitar. So I picked up the Les Paul, started playing, charting out these songs, like, 20 Aerosmith songs, whatever,
Right.
and Aerosmith songs are fun to play, and they're not as complicated to play as, some really insane, like crazy metal or hard rock or whatever. It's just fun blues, fun songs, fun lyric. And I sort of fell in love with playing guitar again.
Mhm.
And then I'll tell you this really crazy story. I was in Las Vegas with this guy. We were doing this thing, and um, there was this 20-year-old kid there, and I was giving him a ride to his hotel. He was staying over where Elvis used to play. It's called the Westgate, used to be the International or whatever. And I get a phone call, and it's the band, right? It's the band that I got booted from. They're like, "Hey man, can you do 2 gigs next year?" I'm like, "Yes." I started tearing up. It was a really overwhelming moment for me. And so this 20-year-old kid, right? I'm sitting here just sort of tearing up on the phone, just and then and he's like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm just like, "Man, those are tears of joy," And I don't know what any of that means. But I guess that's something I had to go through. You know what I mean?
Well, I
Um,
always tell everybody if it's your calling and if it's really what you're meant to do,
yeah,
that even if you try to give it up or walk away from it, it keeps coming back and it keeps
yeah,
coming back and it won't
yeah,
leave you alone.
yeah,
And that's what I heard in that story. It's like there was that human party was like, I'm done. I can't do this. This just hurts too much.
yeah.
And the invitation came and you had the choice when they called you whether you were going to say yes or not.
Well, someone asked me, um, during these conversations I would have, they're like, "Well, if they called you back, would you take the gig?" And I thought about it for a long time, and the answer is yes.
Mhm.
Only I'll bring 2 amps. I found some flaws in the pedal board. One of them was the pedal. I won't say who the manufacturer was, but I'm going through, I'm plugging stuff in, and I'm like, and the thing that I thought like couldn't have been the problem because of how great this pedal is. Um, when I would unplug it, when I would plug it in, all the lights on my power circuit would go red. I'm
Ooh.
like, oh, okay. And you can't see that under the board. It wasn't until I flipped everything over. So I called them. They're like, yeah, send us the pedal. Probably has a short. We'll fix it. So, I mean, I've usually been really good about my gear, but, when I play with I'm going to bring 2 pedal boards, 2 amps. I always bring way too many guitars anyway. And it just, that old sort of scouting thing, be prepared.
Right. Right. Be ready because you never ever know what, especially
No.
electronics and those kinds of things are going to do. And
Yeah.
you just reminded me of this great comment that I had this client. He's a bass guitar player, and his office was at Hollywood and Vine,
Mm,
right about half a block away, and so we were up in his office, and his dad from Indiana was there, and his dad was like, "Why do you have so many guitars on the wall? You can only play one at a time.
mm.
I just don't understand why there's so many." And they're like, "No, at least 10, at least, probably more." And he just looked at me and he goes, "Dad doesn't get it." I said, "No, he doesn't understand." I said, "But they all have their own soul. They have their own sound.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It matters." And but his dad never did figure it out, and that's okay because his dad wasn't a guitar player, so or a musician. His dad had other really great talents and skills. And and you just reminded me of that with all of your
Well,
guitars.
my wife used to ask me, well, why do you have so many guitars? You only have one pair of hands.
Mhm.
I said, well, why do you have so many shoes? You only have one pair of feet.
That's a good
That was
one.
probably the worst argument I ever won.
Yeah, yeah. Probably that wasn't the best line, but it is.
No, that's one I should have thought about later when I'm, 2 days later when I'm driving down. I should have said that.
Yeah.
like the curse in reverse here.
So how do you work with your daughters on following their vision? Are they going
So
into music? What's
yeah,
how
both of my daughters do piano competitions. They've both been in youth symphony. My 15-year-old daughter's in the San Luis Obispo Symphony now. I just took her to rehearsal last night. So that, I mean, they both, passed it on to them. And we've had jam sessions. There's basses and guitars laying around the house. And I used to love, they'd be just sitting in their room, like singing a song, one of them on a guitar, then my other daughter plays violin, and she's going to sit in with us. We put on a New Year's benefit show every year, and what do you call it? So my daughter's going to play piano on "Feeling All Right," and then violin on a song by Haim called "Hallelujah," which is a really amazing song. Oh my God!
that is cool. So your wife is a musician too, or no?
No,
So she's in a house with the three of you.
yeah, she actually hates me. She's not a big music fan. She didn't grow up, in a family that was where music was a priority, and her tastes are a little different. I did take her with me to David Lee Roth at the House of Blues on New Year's Eve once, back in 90 something or whatever. I don't even know what the year it was. And she was looking at my friend Steve and I, because we could barely talk the next day. Because I mean, to see, Van Halen singer at the House of Blues, of course we got there early. We're right in the front. We're screaming our heads off all night. And she's like, why are you people so crazy? Her taste. I took her to see Kenny G at the Chumash Casino, which is literally the worst concert I've ever been to. And it had nothing to do with the music. He actually sells CDs in the middle of his show. Like, he held up he stopped the show and he had a saxophone. He's like, "I'm going to give this saxophone to someone tonight." And we're like, "Woo." He's like, "All you need is the winning ticket." I'm like, "Ticket?" And there's a CD booth at the front of the stage where you can buy CDs. And so there's a line to buy. So he's like, if you buy one CD, you get one ticket. If you buy a CD and I sign it, you get three tickets. And my wife's like, "I want that sax." My daughter's played sax in junior high. I want that Kenny G sax. So here I am in line in the middle of the show while the show is going on with other people. And she already had the CD that I'm buying. But that was just too weird for me,
That's weird.
And then it was weird. It was just weird. Like, I mean, I've seen, you've got your merch booth in the back, or if you're in a club, it's on the side, but like, don't sell CDs in the middle of your show. And I took her to see Lionel Richie. That was a great show. I probably wouldn't have gone to see him on my own, but she just loves that kind of, 80s, what's it called? MOR rock, middle of the road rock, soft rock,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. But there's a balance there.
Right. That's cool. So what do you do for fun?
I play pinball.
Pinball. Nice.
Yeah. So whenever I go to Las Vegas, I go straight from the airport to this place called the Pinball Hall of Fame. It used to be way over on East Tropicana, in the middle of nowhere, like 5 miles off the strip. But now it's actually on the strip. They built a huge, it's like a Walmart sized building with just pinball machines and video games. And they have pinball machines from the, from the first ones ever made till now, and you can play them. They're playable. They have all the old 80s video games, and my friends and I, my best friend Larry, there's a website, pinballfinder.com or something like that. So when I'm on the road, I'll punch in the city or wherever I'm in and go, "Ooh, there's a Kiss pinball machine 2 blocks away, or there's a Monopoly pinball, 5 miles away." I mean, I've driven like 20 miles on the road just to go play pinball. That I love playing pinball. I've been doing it ever since I could look over the top of one. I was going to buy one during COVID. Like, a lot of people were selling them really cheap, because they're not that cheap, really. But someone had like my dream one. It's called Gorgar. It was the first talking pinball machine. It had this demon on it, and the whole thing would shake. And I remember playing that when I was like 9, 10 years old, just being terrified. And so it was for sale, like on Craigslist. I should have bought it, but I didn't. But maybe someday. And actually, at NAM, if anyone's familiar with NAM, um, we were killing time at NAM. I think it was 2021. Yeah, 2021. And we're standing there, and there was a booth called Rock and Roll Industries. They had an Iron Maiden pinball machine and a Minarik guitar, and it said, the whoever gets the high score wins the guitar. So at the time, the high score was 91 million, right? And they're like, oh, we don't think anyone's going to beat that. So I'm there playing it. I get past 91 million. I get past 100 million. I get past 150 million, 250 million. I'm over 300 million. And the people at the booth had left, right? They're walking around somewhere because it was like a small booth. And then I'm screaming at my friends, Steve, like, dude, he's talking to some girl that he knows. I'm like, Steve. And of course, you can't hear anything at NAM. It's so loud in there, right?
Right.
I'm like, so finally I get his attention. I'm like, you have to film me playing this pinball machine and beating it so I can win the guitar. But then they came back and they're like, oh my God. So, all those quarters that I've lost, finally, and years of training finally paid off. I won this awesome Minarik SG guitar.
Oh, I love it. That is brilliant. That's brilliant. So if somebody's listening to us right now and they're thinking, man, I want to do that. I want to learn guitar and I want to play and I want to like let it happen, like I know people who have musician parents and they kind of have the secret dream. Like they want to follow the musical part of their family, but for whatever reason, they got distracted or were afraid or stopped themselves. And so if somebody's in that stuck space, what would you tell them to help encourage?
I would say, first of all, find look online, look wherever, find some kind of an open mic, open jam, places where there's other musicians congregating. And then if you haven't done it before, just go to those without any goal, just to hang out, just to kind of see what's the process like. What are people doing? Like what are they using on the guitars? It's like, a friend of mine who was an actor, he said, before he became an actor, he became an extra just to look around and understand like what's happening on the set, right? Because it's a totally so going to like an open mic, a jam night. You can look in, whatever, here where I live, there was someone put on that, hey, we get together, once a month and we just play bluegrass, which is 3 chords. So if you only know 3 chords and want to have a blast, find like a bluegrass circle, because you just know D, G, and C, and literally that's it. Those are the only 3 chords, 90% of the time you'll ever use. And you will have so much fun playing those 3 chords over and over and over and over. And if you're learning bass and only know 3 notes, they will welcome you with open arms, because there's a lot of guitar players, some mandolin players, maybe what do you call it, banjo, something like that. The one that I joined, it's like I brought a guitar, but I realized there's no bass, so I brought my bass, and here I am playing 3 notes, dun, 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 bluegrass. And they're just like, wow, those 3 notes just like really change the whole sound of the band, because it's adding this lower end. And they were so happy that I was there, because I was this piece of the puzzle that that was missing. And I didn't have to go in there thinking, okay, well, I've got to be as good as Eric Clapton to play with these guys, or got to be as good as Yngwie Malmsteen. Or it's like, hey man, I'm playing 3 notes, I'm playing 3 chords, and everyone just sitting around smiling, So find a bluegrass jam.
And that's really fun. And it's what you're saying is kind of what you were saying about what happened when you were at the school and you went and sat down and all of the guitar players came around, that you put yourself in position. If you're interested in saying, okay, I want to be part of the scene, whatever thing, go put yourself in the position and just feel it out and see what's going on and then go from there. I think that's really good advice about following a vision, is like you have the vision and then go put yourself in the position, even if it's as a spectator, like you said, first, just go checking it out.
Yeah.
Um, and then seeing like, how does it feel? Does it resonate with me? Is this what I want to do? And then if that one place doesn't, there's more, just keep staying open-minded and keep going after it. I think that's really good advice, because I think so many times people overthink things. They
Mhm.
get that, what I call analysis paralysis. They think so much, and then it stops them from just going out and having fun and being in the vibe.
Yeah. Well, that's why like I have these recording things. I have this little task app, right? I don't know if it'll show up on Zoom because they blur things out. And this is just super simple. Like I started getting into like doing stuff on the computer, and I have a bigger task span behind it. But like for me, someone saying, well, here's this thing, and you can have like every amplifier ever made with every distortion box ever made with every I'm just like, oh man, like, okay, that's like, it's like the dog with two bones, right? They look, looks in the water and, oh, I want that bone, opens his mouth to get it. And for
Right.
me, just sort of sometimes less is more, like um, but everyone's different. For someone else, they may be like, oh, wow, yeah, I need that. I need all that stuff. I'm a little more streamlined, and I didn't want the technology sort of slowing me down. Like you're saying, analysis process, like, oh, should I use a 1973 Fender or 1978? Okay, let me Google and see what people are chatting about it on Reverb. Like, oh, okay, but Eric Clapton used one in a club in 1976, but in 1970, he loaned it to, Billy. It's just like, okay, and now it's like, okay, I just needed to record myself playing three chords or whatever.
Right. Right. I think streamlining things is important, is just, have fun and go with the flow of it, because you can overdo it. And then I think that takes some of the beauty away from it. You can get so
Yeah.
overly technical that the artistry and the creativity can be diminished, or at least feel diminished.
And it's a time factor too. I mean, like during COVID, I thought, well, maybe I'll learn how to do all this stuff, but I just spent a lot of time just actually playing the guitar.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. So, is there anything that you wanted to share today that I didn't ask you about, or we didn't talk about before I ask you our final questions of the
Can I
day?
do a plug? Can I do a plug for something?
Sure. Absolutely.
So I went to my friend Thomas's house, and this guy was there. This is a guitar slide, and it's angled, and it's just sort of like a really cool thing. It's called slidewinderring.com. And I've been playing with it for a couple days, and like instead of putting a whole slide on your finger, oh, and it's magnetized. I've seen similar things like this before, but you put it and then it hugs the strings, and it's just there all the time. So, um, like I didn't have this yesterday or the day before yesterday. I didn't have it, and now I have it, and I just don't want to take it off my finger. So I just put in a plug for his name's Alex, and I bought one off him, and they're just amazing.
Oh, that's really amazing. So we'll put the link in the show notes so everybody can go there if you're interested in it. And you will find Frank's bio in the show notes as well. And I love watching the neat things that you do and the places that you play and all of that. I think it's
Well,
really
thank you.
fun to
Thank
watch
you.
living your vision. So is there anything else you wanted to say? Anything on your heart before I ask these last questions?
Happy holidays.
Yes,
Happy
right.
New Year. I'm probably the first one to tell you that, but Happy New Year.
Yes, and the show's going to air right after the new year, so it'll be perfect.
Oh, nice. Okay. Happy New Year.
Yes, right. Okay, so your final two questions are: with all of the traveling you've done all over the place and all of the different experiences, what's the most memorable food you've ever eaten?
Oh, the most memorable food probably in India. It's a spicy rice dish called biryani. And like I love spicy food. And so I was in Hyderabad, and took a bite and just fell in love with it. So anytime I go to an Indian restaurant, I'll ask them, do you have biryani, and how spicy can you make it?
Oh, that's wonderful. That's excellent. I
Yeah.
love Indian food. I'm going to have to ask for that. I don't think I've ever had it. Sounds good. And so your final question of the show is this: if we were going to put a billboard up that the whole world was going to see, everybody was going to see this billboard with Frank Osgood's quote on it, What would your quote be that you want the whole world to see?
The the whole court. Wow, that's heavy. Something from the 70s, like keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking. That's a good
Keep on
one.
trucking, because that, like just keep moving forward, you
Ah,
know.
I love it. I love it. And nobody has said that yet. And I love that. That
Oh,
just
okay.
brought it back to me. So that's
What's been the
wonderful.
most common one?
So thank you very much for taking time out of your life and your schedule the day after your birthday to be here with us and inspire all of us to keep following our vision. So thank you so much, Frank, for being here.
Thank you, Diane. Uh, Great to be here.
All right. Remember, everybody, keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you because you're a rock star. You are here on purpose with a purpose. So go out there and follow your vision. And as Frank says, keep on trucking. Till the next episode, if someone gets me, be well.